And I just wanted to know, what do you think it takes to be a great leader serving in this context of public education?
I think it starts with knowing who you are and what you stand for. So clearly, language and culture is a huge part of what I stand for, and there's an equity lens in absolutely everything I do. And so that drives all of the work I've done with different teams that I've led over the years. I think it starts with knowing who you are, what you stand for, what you believe in, and what are your non-negotiables, basically. I think then the best leaders are able to, also often easier said than done, really maintain a focus on a few things and then help build your teams to be able to execute on that work. I know when I am doing a good job as a leader, when I am spending most of my time just removing barriers and obstacles for them, right? Because that tells me that they're clear on what they're supposed to do, they're clear on how they're supposed to do it, and they're able to identify what's getting in their way, and they can give it to me to help them clear the path. So that's how I know that we're sort of in a groove, is when that's where I'm spending most of my time, is just removing obstacles to allow the teams to do their work.
That sounds like a coaching mindset too.
Yes.
It sounds like you're looking after your people, making sure that you get things out of their way.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that in my heart, I'm still a teacher, and I'm a coach. That's where I am in my heart. And
those long weekends they feel so good.
they do, until you get to the next week and you try to squish 5 days into 4.
That's so true. Oh gosh. That's actually a good way to start, because I am very curious to see and just to learn about what's keeping you busy, like what is filling up your calendar these days. We are, 2 weeks into the school year, and I just wonder.
Well, we are getting ready to launch a big school support model. I think you might have received an email this afternoon, because the way in which academics departments are going to be able to support schools is different in this new reorganization, right? Because we have fewer people, and we need to be more strategic in how we support schools. So we're getting to be a lot more strategic. We're going to have levels of support that schools will be placed into a different level, and say you might qualify for medium level support or priority support from these departments. And so getting that tight and ready to go. I'm really excited in that I've launched a coaching learning series for all of the people doing that support.
Wow.
So they have a lot of skills around coaching, because they have content expertise. And some of them have coaching skills, but not all of them have known how do you coach adults, how do you get to have an impact in classrooms when you're working with other teachers. So that has been a big, something I'm really proud of. We have 140 coaches receiving training once a month. And then we just are working on, we just finished this implementation instrument to help guide those of us as we do learning walks in each other's schools. What are we looking for within the 2 anchors? So we just did a training for Office of Schools Leadership on Wednesday. We're going to be training Cabinet on that next week. And then you all will be hopefully be able to use that as you visit each other's buildings as well.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yes, I received an email from Leticia, my collaborative director, about the instructional rounds.
Yep.
Which I think is a model similar to what we do here at CMS, where we do the visitas.
Yes.
Is derived from the same instructional rounds, which actually come from Dr. What's his name? Peter Elmore from Harvard. I think about 10 years ago, Antonio Esquivel, I think they would take cohorts of teachers to Harvard, and we'll do instructional rounds with him. And that philosophy kind of, at least here at CMS, is stay around. And we do that kind of like those rounds, visiting other classrooms, taking teachers from one classroom to come with us and observe others and just gather those best practices. It sounds, when I read the email from Leticia, it sounded that the same principle is going to be applied across schools. So we go, leaders from these schools go to that school, look for best practices, debrief a little bit, look at those strengths and areas for growth, and kind of like in a very organic way, we learn from each other's best practices.
Right. So every Wednesday morning, we're going to start doing that. And so it'll be school leaders going to each other's schools, as well as leaders in academics departments and just leaders across the Office of Schools, that we're all normed and learning together and getting better together.
That is phenomenal. That is something we always really appreciate. Teachers also really appreciate it. They feel so, I don't know, they feel really, really excited when they get to see a good strategy in a classroom and take it and then apply it in the rooms, and it just like, it multiplies the expertise.
Yeah, it's one thing to tell people in a professional learning. It's another thing for them to see what it looks like in action.
Totally. The coaching piece is really important too. That makes me really excited that you have that initiative, because I think coaching is probably half of the job. If you have the expertise, and in addition to that, you have the skills to communicate it and to help the person that you're coaching feel comfortable, feel encouraged and safe and ready to try. I think that's a perfect combination of expertise, skill set, and also the ability to connect with the other person and improve the practice.
Well, I found that here, right? Because I was a first grade teacher here, and then I went into, I created my own sort of STL role before it was a thing. And then when I came into coaching, and I found, I was put into a coaching type role because I was a really good teacher. But working with adults is very different from working with kids. And there's a lot of things that you need to think about how to differentiate your coaching for teachers and different, for a brand new teacher versus a veteran teacher, right? And so I just found that when I learned some fundamental coaching skills, it just transformed what I was doing 100%. So
one of the first memories I have of you was when I became a principal here at CMS almost 5 years ago, and we had the DCTA strike, and somebody called Nadia came to. No, I think I knew of you before because you had your youngest son here, so I knew you as a parent. But then on the list of support of the central office, I think staff that came, your name was in it, and I was like, "Oh, Nadia, you will be perfect helping me in a 4th grade ELA-S classroom." And I just remember walking by, and you were in action, man. You had, I think you have probably 35 children that day, and you just had perfect control of the whole class. Kids were learning in the middle of, I remember I did probably 2 days in a row, full lunch duty, supervision. We were very short in staff, and you were so kind enough, because I put 2 grade levels in your room, and you were by yourself, and you did not back off from that challenge. I just remember you with super cool poise, very strong, and also teaching, like learning what's happening.
Yeah.
And that made me think of your experience here at CMS, because you just told us downstairs that you taught here for 14, 15 years.
15 years I was here.
Wow.
Yep. And actually, when my son finished in 5th grade here, I went to Laura downstairs. I said, this is the end of an era. Ever since I was 21, I've been coming to the school every day, either as an employee or as a mom. I had a little bit of grieving. I wasn't going to be driving into your neighborhood every day.
Wow. This is a special place.
Yes, it is.
This school is a very special place. So many great, great people, parents, kids. Yeah, it's a blessing.
It is.
I'm so happy that you had the opportunity to experience this community and for over a decade and a half.
Well, yeah, if you add in Dalen's time here too, I think it was about 20 years.
Wow. What is your story? Where did it all started? Today, you're one of the senior leaders in Denver Public Schools. You've been in DPS for decades. Where did it all start?
Well, so most people think I'm Latina, but I'm actually not. So my dad is from India. My mother is English. So my dad and family immigrated to London when my dad was about 13. And now London is one of the most diverse cities in the world, but it wasn't back then when he immigrated. Some of the first immigrants there. There was no such thing as cultural responsiveness in schools, right? It wasn't very welcoming to immigrants. And my dad didn't speak any English. So what they did back then was sink or swim, and my dad sank really hard. And so my grandfather, I should have backed up. My grandfather, his father, had always wanted to be a doctor, and that was always his aspiration. Always had a love of science, but because of his lot in life, he wasn't able to become a doctor. So he always dreamed for my aunt and my dad for better things. He always wanted them to both be doctors, but he thought the only way to do that would be to leave India. So he either wanted to come to this country or to England. And so he was really proud when he managed to land a government job in India, to be placed in London for a year. And so they moved to London for a year, and then after a year, my grandfather had to go back for a little while until he could secure full-time employment in London. Well, so they came into the school system in England, and my dad sank because he didn't speak the language. Wow. And so back then, of course, there was serious systems for tracking. So they decided that my dad must not be on a college-bound track. They decided that the reason why he wasn't learning had to be because he had some form of a learning disability. And so they started whatever processes they had at those times to have him identified as having a learning disability and to put him on a more of a career track. Well, my grandfather was like, I didn't just move my family halfway around the world for actually less opportunities for my kids in this country. So he sold the only car that they had to be able to pay for tuition for my dad to go to special school where they would teach him English. Wow. So fast forward, my dad learned some English, went on to university, and actually ended up getting his doctorate in physics.
Wow. Damn, okay.
So just really goes to show how important language instruction is in our schools, right? How important it is to have the right supports in place for our kids. And it also has the power to show how us as in schools, we have the power to put kids on different trajectories, right?
100%.
And the different moves that we make can be the deciding factors. Luckily for my dad, it was in a upward trajectory, right? He went on, he got his PhD in physics. He met my mom, who was an elementary school teacher in England. They married, and then they moved to the Caribbean. So they lived in Trinidad in the Caribbean.
Oh, really close to Venezuela.
Yes.
Trinidad y Tobago? That's super close. Okay.
So that's where my parents lived when they had me. They I was actually intentionally born in England because their parents were there. So they went to England to actually have me. And then when I was 6 weeks old, I got on my first airplane and we went back to Trinidad. So lived in Trinidad for a couple of years. I absolutely hate the cold. And my mom believes that's because I lived in the Caribbean for my first couple of years. Lots of scenes of me on the beach as a baby.
Wow.
And then after a couple of years, my dad decided, as he used to say, it was time for him to get a grown-up job. Being in the Caribbean was a big party, he used to describe. So they decided then to move from the Caribbean to Detroit in the middle of winter, which sounds like a terrible plan for my it's a big change. So we moved to Detroit, where my dad got a job. My brother was born in Detroit. And then we ended up here in Denver when I was in kindergarten. I actually went to 3 different kindergartens. I went to one in Detroit, then my dad got a job in California, and as soon as we got there, his job fell through. And so we ended up here in Denver, where my dad actually got a job in Golden working for NREL, National Renewable Energy Laboratory, I think. So that's how we ended up here. But both of my grandparents, sets of grandparents, were in England. Both my parents worked. My mom was not able to teach here in this country because she was going to have to redo her schooling. They weren't going to honor her license. So she never picked up teaching formally again. But my brother and I used to spend all of our summers in England with our grandparents, spending time between our both sets of grandparents. When I started school, I had a very strong English accent. I also, in Golden, was not diverse at all. And so I was the only kid in the school with brown skin. I was the only kid in the school that wasn't blonde and blue-eyed. And so I had lots of sort of feeling very much of a fish out of water. Kids used to ask me why I spoke funny.
Gosh.
Always used to get all sorts of weird comments about my lunch because I ate different kinds of food, right? My Indian grandparents used to spend a lot of time here, so lots of questions about why does your grandmother wear those funny clothes, right? There was lots of othering that happened with me. And so I think I had a really typical immigrant experience growing up in which I never really felt like I belonged any place, right? First, I was biracial. In this country, I was far too English and Indian, right? In England, and India, I was far too American.
Yeah.
So I just had this experience of just not really feeling like I fit in anywhere. I also put myself in my own silent phase as a kid because I was made fun of for how I spoke. And so I just decided I wasn't going to talk unless I knew it was going to sound right. So in school, I would just spend all day listening, and then I would go home, and in my room at night, I would practice saying words, and I wouldn't say these words until I knew I could say it right. So words like can't were really hard to master to get that A sounding right. So it was can't and not can't. So that was sort of my growing up. But I always knew I wanted to be a teacher.
You always did, okay.
I always knew I wanted to be a teacher, so I used to line up my dolls and my stuffed animals, and I had a little chalkboard, and I used to sit there and teach them, and I often used to force my younger brother to do that too, and I would make up my own little math worksheets and make him sit down and do them, and he would complain like, I already went to school once. I don't care. Sit down, do my math.
Do it again.
And the best part was getting out a red marker and being like, wrong, do it again. So always wanted to be a teacher. So I went to school at CU Boulder.
Okay.
And I always knew I wanted to be a teacher, but I hadn't really quite figured out what kind of teacher. And I ended up early on doing a practicum in a school in Broomfield. And at this school, it was predominantly white, and there was a little Indian girl in this class that her name was Anjali. And so I immediately sort of connected with her, and I said something to the teacher about her. And the teacher said, "Oh, who?" I said, "Anjali." "Oh, you mean Julie. I call her Julie." And I just had one of those experiences like in a movie where like everything closed in, and I was like, oh my God, we're still doing this to kids? Like I thought it was just me that had my name butchered and not seeing me for who I am and just sending the messages that you need to assimilate, right? And so I thought, oh no, I don't want to do this at all. So that was when I decided I really want to make sure I'm in a school that serves kids that look like me, that have had similar experiences to me, and I want to be the kind of teacher that teaches kids to be proud of their identities, to wear who they are, be really proud of it, to wear their native languages as a badge of honor. And so I decided Denver was the place to be. I also had become pretty proficient in Spanish. And so I also realized that if I were to come into Denver and be a bilingual teacher, I'd have a better chance of getting a job. So I insisted on coming to Denver for my student teaching. So I started in Denver as an ELA-S first grade teacher as my student teaching at Harrington. And then I did that the fall semester of 1998. And in January of 1999, I got a job here as a kindergarten ELA-S teacher.
Oh my God. Who was the principal here when you got hired?
Amazing woman named Ana Garcia Gustafson.
Ana Garcia, okay.
So what had happened here was this neighborhood had been a predominantly white neighborhood, and it had begun to change to serve more Spanish-speaking families, and this school had just become a bilingual school. And Ana was in her first year of principalship here, and it was a result of the Spanish-speaking families picketing outside, protesting outside of the school in the spring because they felt like this school wasn't honoring or respecting hearing them. And so they demanded that they have a Latina principal that came in and really implement a bilingual program. So I was her first hire. There was a kindergarten teacher who had been here for ages, older lady, who had gone out on some sort of a medical leave.
Okay.
And so I was invited in for a quick interview, and then I met the teacher while I was here. And the teacher took me into her classroom, and she was like, there were kids in the classroom, but she wasn't really interested in telling me about the kids. She just wanted to show me all of the materials that were in the cupboards. Here's where we keep the crayons. Here's where we keep but she didn't talk at all about who the kids were, what they've been learning. So I came in the next week. I started on that Tuesday after Martin Luther King Day. Uh-huh. And I came in and I found that most of my kindergarten students couldn't write their names. So I don't know what she'd been doing with them all for semester, but there wasn't much teaching coming in. And so, I was trying to find my feet. I was like a brand new teacher. I was really nervous with what I was doing. And my principal came in, probably my third day on the job, and she saw me. I was having the kids act out the 5 Little Monkeys on the bed for ELD.
Yes.
And she was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Kids are singing and they're happy. And I was like, oh, is that all it takes to make you happy? That's pretty cool. But I had an interesting experience here. It was like my second week on the job. And I wasn't in one of the classrooms that have the bathrooms in the room. It was downstairs at the end.
By the main office?
Like the other end of the building.
Oh, okay.
Like what's now second grade classrooms.
Yeah,
I think,
like the south side of the building.
So I was in one of those classrooms, and so a couple of my kids needed to go to the bathroom, so I sent them out to go use the bathroom. And a second grade teacher from across the hall comes into my classroom. I'm sitting there doing a read aloud on the floor with the kids. She comes into my classroom. She's red in the face. And she says, your kids, every single day, disrupt my kids. Keep your kids out of my class, out of the hallway when I'm teaching kids.
Wow.
And then she said, I don't like you. I don't like these kids. My friend lost her job so they could hire you to teach these kids. I don't like you in this school. Wow. And she says this to me in front of all my kids. So that was sort of how I came in here. But Anna was the most amazing leader. She was here for our kids. She was the most phenomenal advocate for bilingual education. I went to her very upset, and she's like, don't worry, I'm going to take care of this. She also, in February of my first year, the National Association for Bilingual Educators, NAVE, was in town. Uh-huh. And she said, you're going to this conference. I said, are you kidding? I just got here. I had the kids down. No, you're going to go to this conference because it's not just important what you teach kids, but as a bilingual teacher, it's also really important that you learn how to advocate for them and their needs too. So you're going to take the time, you're going to write subplans, and you're going to go to this conference. So that was the type of person she was. She did a lot of personnel changes for the following year. She hired a lot more ELA-S teachers, and from there she started to really build the bilingual program here as it should have.
Wow. That's phenomenal. Mm-hmm. That's why now it makes sense to me why you're such a mama bear for multilingual learners.
Yeah.
That's impressive. Good for her too. What a good hire for her to get you and bring you to the team, especially to switch that culture for multilingual education. That speaks a lot to all the work you did as the executive director of the multilingual education department, because that's where I did my principalship as a dual language school principal, and all the support that I received from you guys was immediate. Like there was not delay on anything that we needed here at CMS, but also in the other, whether it was Teenly or dual language, like the supports, and the accountability was always there too. So it makes a lot of sense to me to see that vision. It's so personal. It's part of your identity.
It is. And I am a mama bear of all of our bilingual schools, but especially this one, because I fought the fight from here. There were many fights that we took on about things like our SPF. At one time, the SPF didn't include any Spanish data, whereas this school has always been about 80, or at least since I've been here, 80% Spanish speakers. Yeah. And so for a while, we were red on the SPF because it was all writing on about 15 English speakers in the building. And so we fought really, really hard to make sure that the district would look at things like Spanish measures, because you can't judge this school on 15 English speakers when the majority of students here are Spanish speakers. And we used to have phenomenal outcomes. I think we still do at the school. Phenomenal outcomes for Spanish speakers. They just haven't done it yet in English, but they are reading and writing and doing critical thinking here in Spanish in a way that we need to honor and uplift, and not label the school as failing because we had 15 English speakers that hadn't yet done it in English.
And the thing is that when you deny language, you also denied identity.
That's right.
That's one of the things that I always tell everybody. It's not only that you're learning a language, it's also you're learning a way to communicate your manners, your ways, your culture. So there are pieces of me that I cannot communicate across unless I do it in Spanish. And all of our babies, when they're here, and if we deny that opportunity for them to show what they know or to show their proficiency in their native language, is a way to, it's not only colonize them, but it's just a way to just deny almost a basic human right, which is your right to be yourself.
Yeah, it was really shocking to me how quickly our kids lose Spanish. So I would have kids that I taught in kindergarten or first grade here that by the time they were in 4th and 5th grade, they'd already lost a lot of their Spanish, and they couldn't hold a conversation with me only in Spanish. And so it was just really important to me that we, first of all, build a dual language program here so that we maintain high levels of Spanish through the end of 5th grade, but also so that we are really communicating the importance to our kids. That, yes, in this country, you do need to speak English. Proficiency in English is important.
Correct.
But Spanish is who you are. That's how you connect to your culture. That's how you're going to connect with your abuelita. That's a big part of who you are. And when you give that up, that's losing a connection to your identity.
I do have to acknowledge publicly that I've been fooled by you because I always thought that you were Hispanic, and I never took the time to be curious and ask you. So I just love this first part of the podcast because it gives me it's so rich now that I know that about you. It's like, wow. And you also know Spanish. And the first question I have is like, you speak your Spanish beautifully and perfectly. I think that's why I was fooled. In fact, I most of the time spoke to you mostly in Spanish. So how do you learn it?
Well, so I spoke about my mother as a teacher. Well, let me go back a little bit. So language has always been a big part of who I am, right? So my grandparents spoke Hindi. I came into this country listening to how people speak. My dad did work with people literally from all around the world. So on any given night, he was always very inviting. So any given night, he would call up my mom and say, hey, I'm bringing these people from Italy over for dinner. What are you cooking? And then she'd go on this mad scramble to have to go and produce a dinner for people. So I would say that first of all, I've always been around lots of languages. My aunt, my dad's sister, she married a German. And so my cousin also speaks German. So just languages have always been around me. And so I listen very much to how different languages work and different accents. My kids are often making fun of me in that when I talk to people, I often emulate their accent.
Gotcha.
Just because I have that ear. So I've always had the ear for language. But growing up in Denver, Spanish is all around us. And I had a phenomenal Spanish teacher in middle school. Phenomenal. Oh. And she emphasized oral language all the time. She said, reading or writing is what you're going to do for homework for us. But what you're going to do for me is you're going to speak Spanish. You will speak Spanish. And so all of our class time was always speaking, as we now teach people to do for ELD, but she knew that back then before we had that guidance. And she would do things, because I had her in middle school, but I also had her in 11th grade. She would do things like put us on rotations so that every day a couple of kids had to give an oral presentation for 7 minutes. And the goal was always that you could do this oral presentation without any notes and just speak. So some of these oral presentations were things like, you're going to get up and you're going to tell a fairy tale. And so we had to learn how to just tell a fairy tale off the top of our head in Spanish. So I had a phenomenal teacher, but it also helped that I lived in a place where Spanish was all around me, and I had lots of other ways to use Spanish all the time.
That's awesome. It was a social tool as well for you to make friends and connect with the community.
Yep.
And when you were a teacher here, parents would see in you somebody they could come and connect, and, you know, it appears to me that you were naturally a leader, especially when you were here as a teacher. It was really good that you had a phenomenal principal that also saw that in you. And I wonder, at some point, do you start seeing yourself as a leader, as a strong mama bear advocate for those kiddos? When do you have a moment where you were like, okay, this is my path, this is what I've been called to do in this earth?
You know, I think it really did start with Anna, because I told you I put myself in a silent phase in school. So all the way through school, if you look at any of my report cards, I always say, like, I wish Nadia would speak. So I was really, really quiet. And it was actually Anna that really broke me out of my shell. And she was always soliciting my feedback and my opinions. And then I would offer a suggestion, and she would say, great, you go do that. Go do that. Go figure out how to do that. Go get a committee together and go make that happen. And there were times where I was like, this is cool. And there were other times I was like, really? I don't have time for this. But many times she gave me no choice. And she was always reminding me of how important our work here is. That we really are putting our kids on one trajectory or another. And so if we don't do all of these other things, that is going to help set the direction for our kids.
100%. I tell every year during continuation, I dress my kindergartners with our cap and gowns, and they do the walk as if they were graduating from college or high school. And when I give my little speech to them, I just tell them, you're here because you're getting a superpower. And the superpower is the superpower of being bilingual. And they all get super excited. And same with my fifth graders. And it's who I am. It's the fabric of my own relationship with life. It's through language, I am able to communicate who I am. And if I don't use my native language as well, there is a piece of me that is dying with that language. And when we let that language die, a piece of us dies as well. I believe on it deeply. I find myself with a lot of, longing or nostalgia from the days when I was in Venezuela. And when I recall those memories, Spanish is the only way I can remember them. I cannot think of my past and remember those dialogues and experiences and conversations in English. It has to be in Spanish. The sentiment, even the words we use to express our feelings are charged with a different meaning by using your native language. So it's phenomenal. So the idea of keeping language as a way to keep your identity is something that to me is intertwined. I know that if I honor high quality Spanish instruction, that if I embed the cultural element of what speaking Spanish and learning Spanish is, I will also honor the cultures, the identities, the backgrounds of my families. It's like a double win. It's a super, super awesome double win. So,
yeah, I think it's really interesting because now that I have a teenager, I've been watching. We talk a lot here in this district about historical patterns, right? So I've been watching a lot. So thinking about my dad. So my dad learned the hard way that in order for him to be successful, he had to learn English. And so my grandparents started only speaking English at home to help him learn English. Well, he's an example of language loss. By the time he went to college, he'd lost his native language. But he also internalized all of those messages that he needed to assimilate and shed his culture to be successful. He then, when he got a little older, felt the need to reground and reconnect with his culture. I noticed that I did some similar things when I was a teenager, right? I learned those messages about you've got to shed who you are and assimilate and in order to be successful. And it's really interesting now that I've got a teenager, I'm having the same message, same conversations at home with my son. You've
Really?
got to be proud of who you are. You've got to be proud of all of your parts. You need to know all of your culture, because all of this is what makes the whole of you. And I know you just want to fit in right now, and you are absolutely unique. Nobody else has experiences and culture that you do, and you've got to own those. You have to own all of your parts. You can't just go, because my husband is half Black and half Latino, and so my kids are made up of four parts.
Wow.
And so, yes, there's nobody else in this world right now that has your four parts. And you need to know all four of your cultures, and you need to wear all four of them proudly. And so it's fascinating how you just see these patterns repeat over and over, and how now I understand some of the things my dad did. I understand what I did, and now I'm watching it happen with my son, and it's really frustrating. Like, please just learn from our mistakes.
I know.
Yeah.
It takes me to the idea of leadership. The greatest responsibility that we have now as leaders is to just make sure that our kids discover themselves, and in the process of discovering themselves, they're proud.
Yes.
And unique and special and loved and cared for. All those ideas of equity, access, opportunity, it all comes from that acknowledgement that each kiddo is very unique and special in their own backgrounds. And so...
Well, I think especially as biracial and multiracial people, we get treated by what we are presented, like what we look like, right? So I've been... I look Latina here in Denver, so I've been treated like a Latina most of my life, even though I'm not really Latina, right? My son looks very brown. If you were in India, he would look pretty Indian. If you were here, people think he's Latino, right? So that's how he is behaving, because that's how he's being treated. And so, yes, and you need to be proud of all of your parts. You need to know all of your parts. All of this makes you up. It's really interesting to me how the way we look is how we are treated, and that just forms your experience.
It's a precondition to how you're going to be treated, 100%. So going back to the idea of leadership, it's a great responsibility. It's a great duty for us to receive our babies every day in the morning, and know that they have their own bags, historically, personally, emotionally, and I always wonder, am I being the best leader I can be? Like, what are the things that I'm doing well? What are the things I'm messing up? Who can tell me? How can I be better? And it's always that process of self-reflection that keeps me just on the spot, just trying to make sure that I'm doing it right. You have been a leader in multiple different capacities, and I just wanted to tap into your own experience. It's a big responsibility to be charged with answering the question of what makes a great leader. I don't want you to feel responsible for giving the right answer, but I think maybe collaborative we can contribute to the definition of what a great leader is. And I just wanted to know, what do you think it takes to be a great leader serving in this context of public education?
I think it starts with knowing who you are and what you stand for. So clearly, language and culture is a huge part of what I stand for, and there's an equity lens in absolutely everything I do. And so that drives all of the work I've done with different teams that I've led over the years. I think it starts with knowing who you are, what you stand for, what you believe in, and what are your non-negotiables, basically. I think then the best leaders are able to, also often easier said than done, really maintain a focus on a few things, and then help build your teams to be able to execute on that work. I know when I am doing a good job as a leader, when I am spending most of my time just removing barriers and obstacles for them, right? Because that tells me that they're clear on what they're supposed to do, they're clear on how they're supposed to do it, and they're able to identify what's getting in their way, and they can give it to me to help them clear the path. So that's how I know that we're sort of in a groove, is when that's where I'm spending most of my time, is just removing obstacles to allow the teams to do their work.
That sounds like a coaching mindset too.
Yes.
It sounds like you're looking after your people, making sure that you get things out of their way.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that in my heart, I'm still a teacher, and I'm a coach. That's where I am in my heart. And I would say that is feedback that I get a lot from my teams, is that they appreciate that I do approach the work as a coach. My goal is to take a look at every person. I used to think about that as a teacher. Like, my goal was to get to know every kid. Like, every kid's a little puzzle. I need to figure out every kid and figure out what clicks for these kids. The same thing is true with my teams. Let me get to know each person, what makes them click, where are they really good, where do they need extra support, and then help build them up so that they can be their best selves.
Wow. So you have a leader who is able to maintain focus on a few key things, know their values, know what they stand for. I interpret the few last things you said about a good leader is somebody that's able also to develop others, like that shared leadership, that shared responsibility.
Well, I'm only ever as good as my team.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you have to have a good, strong team behind you to do any work. So if I have a great team, then I'm doing my job, right? I've got a great team that knows what to do. They know how to do it. They've got the supports to be able to do it. That's how the work gets done. We can't do our work in education as individuals, right?
No, that isolation piece is very tempting, because at any level of leadership, I think that the first leaders we have in the building is the teachers. And it's very tempting for teachers to just close the door and do it their way because of just the demands of the job. But yeah, you have to be collaborative. And then you become an assistant principal or a principal or anything beyond principalship. And when it gets bigger and bigger, it's just very tempting to just tell people what to do and go and do it.
But it never works.
It never does.
It never works, right? I mean, it doesn't work with kids. It doesn't work with adults. Like, just do it because I said so. It doesn't work. People have to understand the why. They have to know how to do it, and they have to know how to ask for help when they aren't able to do, when things are getting in their way.
Absolutely. What is your so now you have a new team, I assume, and what's the difference? Is it this current team way bigger than the previous team you had?
Yeah.
Significantly, exponentially?
It's enormous, yeah. So I was the executive director of Multilingual Education before, which is about 50 people, and now I'm over all academics, which is around 350 people.
Oh my God. That's huge. That's huge. I'm very happy just to hear that coach mindset that you have is kind of like very nurturing of your team. So especially as we navigate this transition and everything new and everything with new expectations and new trajectory, having somebody that is your supervisor, your manager, your boss, however you want to call it, and also you can lean to that person to get guidance is super special.
Well, I think we need to, I really love Priority 6D this year. That's really focusing on rehumanizing the work environment, because what we've been doing previously is piling things on people's plates and saying, but please just go take care of yourself, right? And that doesn't work. I can only do so much deep breathing when I have a list a mile long of all the things I need to do.
Yep.
So I'm really appreciating this new priority, which is giving me permission to slow things down, allow people to be more focused, and creating expectations that they do slow down and take care of themselves.
It's so necessary. It's so necessary. And it has always, historically, has been treated as something that you do on the side whenever you can, but it truly should be just how you are describing it. It should be a priority, and it should be embedded into what you do.
And I have found in this new role that it's incredibly important for me to model that. And so what I've been doing the last, since I've been in this role, is really trying to set the expectations and model. Look how I am getting myself organized. Look at how I am deliberately making space for me to do the work. Look at how I am disconnecting on weekends to spend time with my family. So it's really important that I'm modeling that for everybody. Now, I can't say I'm doing it all the time. You know, I was working late last night, but not everybody needed to know it, and not everybody needed to feel like like I had that same expectation for them. So we've put in the Office of Schools, we put in some new communication norms that says we aren't going to send emails after a certain time. That's not to say I'm not writing emails after a certain time. I'm just scheduling to send them at 8 a.m. the next morning instead of shooting them off at 9:30 last night when I was actually writing them.
That 6C, the rehumanizing the work, is one of the reasons why I am so passionate about this podcast and this space, because every leader has a story, and every leader, it's very easy for us to disconnect from each other when our leaders and our senior leaders don't have as many of opportunities to share about themselves and about their journeys. And when we humanize the work, when we connect with each other and the community at large can see our stories, I think it's a great opportunity for us to connect, to find those opportunities to see each other as human beings. And I've said it in plenty of past episodes, and I don't want to be repetitive, but we don't talk about love enough.
Yeah.
You know, it's like this is a journey. Like nobody's getting out of this alive, and we are with each other for the most part, and getting to know each other's story and getting to know each other's challenges and struggles is, to me, is very heroic. Just to see a human being who is flawed and who is doing their best, showing up. To me, that's beautiful. Like I don't expect the world to be composed of perfect human beings for things to work. I think the world will be better as we understand each other, as we love each other a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And making that space is, to me, making that space to get to know each other individually on their particular challenges and gifts. To me, that's the root of equity as well. Mm-hmm. When I think of equity, I think of opportunity, dignity, and love. And that's what I tell my teachers here for my kids. Every kid deserves as many opportunities as they need. They deserve to be treated with dignity because they are worth it. Everything I do for you is worth it. And they deserve to be treated with love. Every kiddo should walk out of these doors knowing that at least one person loved them today. And that should be enough for them to come back tomorrow. And I try to do that with my staff and my teachers as well. It's we should be the reason why they want to come back to work as leaders in the community. So it also makes me wonder what your thoughts are about equity. You being such a big mama bear with our multilingual education and our multilanguage learners. I'm sure you have had plenty of time to think deeply about equity and as it manifests through language, but also through lived experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the inequities are huge, right? That we have both nationally as well as that show up within our system, and it's really important to me that every kid in DPS is getting a high quality educational system experience that also is valuing who they are and what they bring to the table, and helping them know how to use who they are as a way to propel them forward to do good in this world, right? And not something that they need to be ashamed of, which were some of the messages that I got as I was younger. So it's really, really important to me that all of our kids in all of our schools are getting just that high quality educational experience in a way that is making them feel loved and nurtured and empowered.
Yeah. Dr. Tony Smith was telling me yesterday or a couple of days ago a very similar definition of equity. He was talking about the elimination, for him equity is the elimination of predictability based on the predictability of outcomes based on how you look or externalities. You know, like eliminating all those factors that allow me to predict whether or not you will be successful just because of the way you look or the zip code you live in.
Right, or even how they, how the way in which kids might be showing up now is not a predictive of how they are in the future, right? Like, who knew that me as that quiet little kindergartner who would refuse to speak would one day be sitting here on a podcast like this and be able to get up on stage and speak at a July Universal in front of hundreds of people, right? Like, I think it's important that we aren't just making a judgment in the moment for kids. We just need to be making sure that we're giving all of the kids the tools and skills to be able to do whatever they decide to do later on in life.
Yeah, and you can tell here when you're in schools and you see the kiddos move from one grade to the next, 2 months of summer break, it's all it takes for them to show up completely different.
Right.
Completely different. I have several third grade boys and fourth grade boys from last year that we were developing some behavior plans and some social emotional support for them. I created an after school club called Boys on the Run to have them run with me and do exercise. And the idea was just to spend time with them and do a little bit of character development. And I was telling my dean of culture, I said to her, oh, you just wait. They're going to come in August and they're going to be complete different kids. And that's exactly what happened. They are here and they're like the happiest kiddos, super independent. And so far, they seem to be in a new stage of their life. Like they grew up from the phase they were before. And I really love what you're bringing up about your current circumstances or the way you're showing up today is not going to predict your performance in 15, 20 years. Mm-hmm. That's really important, especially as we lead for a K through 12 educational system, making sure that equity continues to be a priority throughout the years for each kiddo because their needs will transform as they do as well.
Yeah. I think my oldest son who came to school here, he used to annoy me a lot when he was in elementary school because he questions everything. He judges teachers instantly. He decides if he's going to work for them or not instantly when they walk in the door. And he's not going to do any work that he doesn't think is meaningful, which I can't even tell you the number of times he was in trouble in school, not just here, but at other schools, because there would be a substitute that would walk in the room. He'd be like, oh, I don't like this one. I'm not working for this person today, right? Or this assignment is dumb. I'm not going to do it. But now I'm seeing him as a junior in high school. Holy cow, look at his critical thinking skills, right? Like he's going to really apply that in a great way. We could not get him to conform when he was younger, but maybe we should never have been asking him to conform then, right? Maybe we should have been thinking about how do we tap better into his critical thinking skills. Not a judgment call at all because I was here, so I was part of the ones trying to make him conform. But now I'm wondering, like, what are we doing for these kids that are real critical thinkers and are questioning everything?
Yeah, the idea of critical thinking and compliance. Mm-hmm. Like, do you have to comply? I don't know. It's something that I would like to elaborate in the future because those critical thinking skills sometimes manifest in defiance or sometimes manifest on actually don't want to do it. Yeah. Actually, what you're telling me doesn't make any sense.
I really cannot see how this assignment is going to help me at all in my future.
Your husband is, you said African American and Hispanic. Mm-hmm. Where is his Hispanic side from?
Yeah, so he has a really interesting story. So his family is originally from Guanajuato, Mexico. And in the Mexican Revolution, just after the Mexican Revolution, it was really hard to find work. Food was hard to find. And so his great-grandfather hopped on a train at the age of 14 and rode the train up to this country. And so he's from a place called Silvis, Illinois, which was like a big train hub at the time. So his great-grandfather got off at the age of 14 in search of work. And this place in Silvis, Illinois was where quite a few Mexicans came up looking for work. And they were given old train boxcars to live in sort of an old junkyard. And
so what is that? Like
the cars on a train?
Like the metal piece, the structure?
Yeah, sort of like the big box that you would carry the cargo inside.
Oh, gosh, okay.
And so these Mexican families started creating homes out of these boxcars, and they started forming streets. It was an old junkyard, and they made these boxcars. And so my husband's grandfather, whose name was Joe Torranes, he was actually born in one of the boxcars. And he would tell the stories about how these Mexican families started helping each other convert these boxcars into houses. Wow. So they would literally build the houses with their own hands. So that the home that belonged to his grandparents was actually physically built by his family members. And Joe Torranes went on to become the mayor of this town in Silvis. He was the first Hispanic mayor in Illinois, state of Illinois. And what his life's work is that there is a street in Silvis, Illinois, where every home on that block sent at least one son to fight in wars for this country, and those sons died.
Oh, gosh.
So his grandfather worked to put this street on the map. He called it Hero Street, USA, because that is the ultimate sacrifice that you could give to this country, is to sacrifice one of your own children for the freedom of this country.
I cannot even imagine that.
So there's a park and there's a monument there, and his life's work was always to make that become a national monument to mark the contributions of Mexican Americans to this country.
Wow.
So
that is really special.
yeah.
Have you been there?
Yeah.
So you see the street, the name of the street and everything.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That must be so meaningful.
Well, you know what was the coolest thing was several years back, I walked into one of our Denver middle schools, and the kids were reading, they used to have these fluency passages that they would read for a couple minutes at the start of a lesson just to get their fluency up, and they would time how fast they could read these passages. So I walk into this middle school classroom, and I look, and they're reading a passage about Joe Terranes.
What?
So Joe was still here. He's now passed on, but he was still here at the time. So I took all of these pictures and got to send them and said, look, kids in Denver are here reading about you and Hero Street, USA.
Oh my God, that's so cool. I'm so happy he got a chance to know that they were talking about his story.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, that gave me goosebumps. I'm asking you because when we think about equity and Black excellence, I am wondering what other leaders think about it, and where, if there is an intersection between equity and Black excellence, if they are living within each other, or if it's how do we approach the conversation about both topics without being contradictory or without being redundant or trying to intentionally specify what each one of them is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we talk about historical systems of oppression, there's a lot more commonalities than there are differences, right? There was segregation in our schools in this country, both to prevent the integration of our Black students, but also for our brown students, right? There were a lot of systems put in place to not integrate our neighborhoods, to not integrate our schools. You can see, there's historical pictures of signs up that say no Blacks, no Mexicans, no dogs, or something in those orders, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that there's a lot more similarities than there are differences here. And I think that it's really, really important that we take the time to recognize how those systems of oppression have played out for generations of kids within our schools. And we need to be doing some strategic things to make sure that we are not replicating the sins of the past, that we are intentionally working to dismantle those systems so that both our Black and brown students thrive in Denver public schools.
Yeah, absolutely. I did an episode with Darlene Ledoux, and it was super cool. She was telling me about, she was walking out her school when she was, I think, in 6th grade. Mm-hmm. She was with Cesar Chavez, and I mean, super strong advocate. And it makes me think of, when I think of equity and the Black excellence resolution and all those ideas, how important it is to keep at the forefront of what we do the kiddos who systemically might appear to be set up to not succeed.
Yeah, and I think that you're making a really good point about making sure that this is, that we aren't separating things, right? So if I think about my kids who have 4 different backgrounds, if we only have a Black excellence plan and we only have certain things in place to support our Latino families, like where do my kids fit in, right? We have a lot of biracial and multiracial kids that we also need to think about, not forcing them into one box, but allowing them to stay whole as we think about equity. And so that's really important to me, that as we think about our equity initiatives, we aren't forcing people into corners and into sides. It's a way to bring different groups of people together and find a lot of the commonalities, and also being intentional about looking at who is succeeding in our schools and who isn't, and questioning why that is.
Yeah, and the idea of when we focus on who need it the most, everybody wins.
Right.
It's not a scarcity mentality. It's not like, let's take our piece quick because there is not enough for everybody. It's more about, let's see who need us the most. Let's make them visible. Let's treat them with dignity. And in the process of meeting the needs who need it the most, everybody wins. We make our team stronger, and we all move forward. I love what you said earlier. Like I will only be as good as my team. That happens with our society and with our kids and with our families. We cannot call ourselves super successful if we are not impacting the life of others, building each other up. It makes me think of also you as a leader and an educator for decades. Have you learned any lessons in your leadership journey that have also improved the quality of your life as a mom, as a wife, as a friend?
I think I'm continually learning this lesson about what I'm bringing to the table and making sure that I'm tapping into my strengths. I think that I still see myself as the first grade teacher here, right? And I see lots of commonalities between who I am and everybody else, and I don't always realize how people are viewing me and where I might have additional things to offer. And so I'm constantly being reminded of what those things are. I think it's really, really important to stay grounded in what's most important, because leadership can take you in a variety of directions. I have a quote from Darlene Ledoux written up on my board that said, "Stay strong in the winds. You know who you are." And so I think that that's just really important, because in leadership, there's always fires that we're putting out. There's always competing priorities. And so continually reminding ourselves to stay focused on what's the most important thing. And so, I've been doing some work on my team about every week, just define for yourselves 3 priorities that if at the end of this week I've done them, I know that I've done a good job. Because there's always going to be a never-ending list of to-dos on your to-do list, and you're never going to get them all checked off. But if at the end of the week you can look back and say, I did the 3 most important things this week, then you know that you're on the right track.
Amen. That's very true. That's a great leadership strategy to keep the focus on the non-negotiable things.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also really important to stay human, right? I think that the work can suck you in, and you could work 80-hour weeks all the time, and that's not good for anybody. We have families, we need breaks, and so always pushing ourselves to disconnect and know that we will be better if we take some breaks and rest. I will come back better and stronger than if I just keep plugging along all the time at this crazy pace.
Yeah, that's making me think of Cesar Cedillo. That's one of the things that he shared with me as well. And he he loves his kiddos. They're super athletes, mm-hmm. and he's always, I think he uses that as a way to stay grounded as a human being. Mm-hmm. And as an athlete myself, I always aware of the risk of overtraining. Like I feel that I have to train and train and train every day, and actually taking days off every certain time, letting your body recover is good for you to go back stronger. It's a great metaphor for the work as well. I could work myself to death, literally, and I know you as well. But being mindful of putting a stop and then getting back, it allows you to be stronger and be more functional and be more, competent. So,
yes, somebody used to say it's better you can sprint, but you shouldn't marathon, right? So there are times where we do have a lot that's happening. You can go for a quick sprint where you're going all in for an amount of time, but you can't marathon that. If you marathon that, you'll end up falling apart one way or another. Yeah.
It has been a real pleasure to be with you this afternoon. And wow, I learned a bunch of super cool things about you. And your leadership definitely makes me feel at ease and and motivated to take care of my school, knowing that there's people like you and like Cesar, like Dr. Smith, taking care of the bigger things. So I really, really appreciate it. I'm very grateful for your leadership and your work.
Well, thank you for giving us the opportunity. This is wonderful. Thank you for starting this.
Yes. As we wrap up and finish up our episode, I wonder if there is any message you want to share with all the leaders that might be listening to this, and a message that might give us some unity, some clarity, some inspiration as we embark on this year, and so we can finish strong and connected.
Yeah, I mean, I think that at the end of the day, we're all here for the same reason. We're all here for kids, right? And so I think that we are all here there's more commonalities and why we're here than the differences. And so we just need to stay grounded in that. We're all here for the right reasons. We're all trying to do the right work. We might sometimes disagree on what's the right how to get there, but there's a whole lot more commonalities in what we're trying to accomplish. We're all here for kids. We all want our kids to thrive. We want our families to also be thriving. We're all here for those same reasons. And so I just appreciate this opportunity to be able to hear from different leaders that we are putting a human aspect to the work, and we realize that we are all here for the same reasons.
Amen. Yes, that's what it is. And I think this is going to get us closer and more human. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
Yes.
You're amazing.
Oh, right at you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking care of my school.
Oh, my goodness. I love this school.
Of course.